Stepdad kicked me out for being a burden. While my stepbrother laughed and said I deserved it, now, years later, they are begging me to let him crash in my apartment because he is unemployed. A few years ago, my life took a turn I never expected, an act of betrayal that left me feeling shattered. My stepdad, Mark, once threw me out onto the street simply because I was deemed a burden. My stepbrother, Leo, who was then a few years older, greeted my departure with sneers and a cruel comment, "You kind of deserved it." Now, over a decade later, that same family is reaching out, desperate and begging me to let Leo crash at my place because he's lost his job and has nowhere to go. Hi Reddit, I'm struggling to understand if I'm the villain here or if I'm justified in setting boundaries. My mind is a whirlwind of conflicting feelings, and I need outside perspectives because the people closest to me are making me doubt my own judgment. I'm 30 now, living what I consider a stable, independent life. I work in a decent-sized city, own a 2-bedroom apartment I pay for myself, and I've fought tooth and nail to get here. My financial footing is solid. My stepbrother Leo, 32, recently lost his job, and with his lease ending soon, he's in a tight spot. My mom and stepfather, Mark, Leo's dad, called last week, asking if I could take Leo in temporarily. Logistically, it made sense. My apartment's in the city, close to opportunities in Leo's field, and I have a spare room I use for storage and work. But I said no. Just a flat-out no, and that's when everything blew up. Now I'm branded as selfish, cold, and unkind. They say I'm clinging to the past and failing to be a good family member, but they don't know the full story. Here's the backstory. When I was 10, my dad suddenly died of a heart attack. The shock was devastating. 2 years later, my mom met Mark, a widower with a son, Leo, 2 years older than me. They married quickly, and suddenly I had a new family. We moved into a new house. For the first few years, it was a strange adjustment. Mark was kind enough but distant. Leo and I mostly kept to ourselves, occasionally teasing each other, but nothing too terrible. It was an uneasy coexistence, but manageable. Things worsened when I hit 16. Mark's construction business hit a hard patch, he lost a lot of money, and the tension at home became unbearable. My mom and Mark argued almost nightly about finances. I'd overhear their fights, Mark bitter, criticizing how much was being spent, how he was supporting an extra mouth that wasn't even his. I tried to keep out of the way, taking on a part-time job to cover my small expenses. Still, I felt like I was a burden, no matter what I did. Leo, noticing my struggles, started turning meaner. His teasing grew sharper, calling me the freeloader, joking about how much I was costing his dad, always quiet about it, but I knew. When I was 17, I needed new running shoes for school, worn out from years of use. I had saved some money but was short about $20. I asked my mom for help, and Mark overheard. That night, everything exploded. Mark went from yelling about how I was draining his resources to telling me I was almost an adult and needed to face the real world. He told me to pack my things and leave within a week. I was paralyzed, my heart pounding. I looked to my mom for support, but she just cried silently, offering no resistance. That night, I broke down in my room, clutching clothes and tears, while Leo leaned against the doorframe, smirking. His words struck me like a punch. "You know you kind of deserve this." He said I'd been a burden for years, and it was about time I left. Then he walked away, leaving me shattered. That was the moment I truly understood how cruel my family could be. I left a few days later, crashing with a close friend and her parents. I worked non-stop, full-time grocery shifts, late-night cleaning jobs, while going to community college and eventually transferring to a state university. It took 6 years of relentless effort, but I built my life from the ground up, proving to myself that I could succeed despite their betrayal. Over time, my relationship with my mom grew fragile but real. We reconnect now, slowly, on my terms. I see Leo rarely, only at family events, exchanging awkward hellos. We've never spoken directly about what happened, and I've kept my distance from Mark altogether. Now, they're calling me, asking for a favor. They want Leo to stay with me temporarily. I told them no. When Mark pushed, emphasizing my success and independence as reasons I should help, I lost my patience. I reminded him that he threw me out when I was vulnerable, that I had worked tirelessly to rise above their neglect. I told him I was not his charity case, not someone to be forced into helping a family member who had once been so cruel. They argued that Leo's in a tough spot, that I have a nice life, and that I should do the right thing. But I remember the night I was cast out, Leo's smirk, his mockery, his cold judgment. I can't forget that. Plus, their current situation isn't as simple as they make it seem. They've downsized, living in a small condo far from the city, with no space for Leo to stay comfortably, even if they wanted to. Leo, meanwhile, isn't a total failure. He had a good job, a decent apartment, until recent corporate layoffs wiped that out. The reason they're so desperate for him to stay with me is purely logistical. My apartment's location makes it easiest for him to find work and attend interviews. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm not willing to be the fallback for someone who once tore me down when I was at my lowest. When they called last week, I hesitated before saying no. Mark insisted I owed Leo because of my success, and I snapped. I recounted my sacrifices, working multiple jobs, sleeping on buses, living paycheck to paycheck. I told him I built my life despite their abandonment, not because of it. My mom begged, claiming Leo had changed, that he was just a stupid kid back then, and that I should forgive him. I asked if he ever apologized, or even acknowledged what he said when I was crying, broken and afraid. She fell silent. I finally told her about Leo's words that night, how he stood in the doorway, watching me, and said I deserved what was happening. Her silence was deafening. Then Mark took the phone, denying everything, accusing me of manipulation. That was the breaking point. I told them they had no right to ask me to host someone who had been so cruel, and I ended the call. Since then, I've received pleading texts from my mom, and my aunt, her sister, called me, urging me to be the bigger person. But I feel so torn. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm hurt. But I also want peace. Am I unforgiving for refusing to open my home to Leo, knowing what he once said? Or am I justified in protecting my sanctuary after everything? A few weeks ago, I finally cut contact, blocking Leo's number and muting my mom's messages. The support I received here helped me realize I had every right to prioritize my well-being. Then, unexpectedly, my aunt reached out with a different tone, apologetic and serious. She told me she'd confronted my mom, who finally confessed the full story of my expulsion and Leo's words. She was horrified, and she told me I was right to feel betrayed. A few days later, Leo sent an email, not asking for help but offering a sincere apology. He acknowledged his mistakes, admitted how he resented me as a teenager, and expressed shame for his cruelty. He wrote that he finally understood how deeply he'd hurt me and that he was sorry for his actions. While I didn't forgive him outright, reading those words eased a lot of the lingering anger. It was a quiet recognition of my pain. I responded briefly, accepting his apology but reaffirming that my house remains a safe space for me, one I can't share with him. I offered him a small gesture, a one-time gift of $500, to help him find temporary accommodation while he searches for a new job. He responded with gratitude, and my mom finally acknowledged my decision, promising she'd respect it. Today, I feel a strange sense of closure. The anger isn't gone entirely, but the weight of that betrayal has lifted. I've reclaimed my peace, and I realize I don't owe my family anything I don't want to give. Thanks to everyone who listened and supported me. They reminded me that standing up for myself isn't selfish, it's necessary.